Aurora and Kyle, half naked and drenched in milk, wearing diapers. I never thought much about the concept of an ordinary world until mine started to feel anything but ordinary. 6 years into our marriage, Aurora and I had settled into a routine that felt as comfortable as an old work boot. Every morning I'd kiss her and Ethan goodbye before heading off to the construction site. The days were long, filled with the constant hum of machinery and the satisfaction of watching buildings take shape under my supervision. Coming home each evening, I'd find Aurora in the kitchen, Ethan playing nearby. The smell of dinner would hit me as soon as I opened the door. It was nice, predictable. But lately something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was a distance growing between us. At first, I chalked it up to the natural ebb and flow of married life. Raising a kid isn't easy, and we were both tired most of the time. But as the weeks went by, I noticed Aurora seemed distracted, often staring off into space during our conversations. When I'd ask her what was wrong, she'd snap back to attention and brush it off with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I tried to bridge the gap, but between long hours at work and the demands of fatherhood, I found myself at a loss. Our intimacy had dwindled to quick pecks and occasional obligatory moments. It wasn't awful. Just different. I told myself it was just a phase, that we'd find our way back to each other. But deep down, a nagging doubt began to take root. I should have seen it coming. Looking back now, the signs were all there, scattered like breadcrumbs leading to a truth I wasn't ready to face. It started with little comments here and there. Aurora would say things, almost teasingly, about wanting to spice things up in the bedroom. At first, I didn't think much of it. We'd been together for years, and I figured it was just a way of keeping things interesting. One night, as we were getting ready for bed, she casually mentioned, it might be fun to try something new, maybe experiment a little. I remember pausing, toothbrush in hand, and looking at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. What do you mean? She shrugged, a mischievous glint in her eye. Oh, I don't know. Just something different. Don't you ever wonder what it would be like to be taken care of in a different way? I spat out my toothpaste and rinsed my mouth, buying time as I tried to decipher her meaning. I thought I was taking care of you, I said, aiming for a light tone, but hearing the confusion in my voice. Aurora just smiled and kissed my cheek. You do, babe, I just mean never mind. I should have pressed further, should have asked what she really meant, but work had been brutal that week, and I was exhausted. I let it slide, figuring if it was important, she'd bring it up again. A few weeks later, we were watching a movie on the couch after putting Ethan to bed. Out of nowhere, Aurora turned to me and said, "Wouldn't it be funny if we tried something childlike together?" I nearly choked on my beer. What? She laughed. But there was something off about it. Like role-playing or something. Wouldn't that be a riot? I forced a chuckle, not quite sure how to respond. Yeah, I guess that would be different. Aurora's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. Just a thought, she said, turning back to the movie. I sat there, beer forgotten in my hand, trying to make sense of these strange comments. Was this normal? Did other couples talk about this kind of stuff? I told myself it was just Aurora being playful, trying to keep our relationship fresh. But deep down, a part of me wondered if there was something more to it, something I was missing. I came home early from work, feeling the weight of another day on my shoulders. The house was quiet, which was unusual for this time of evening. Ethan's toys were scattered across the living room floor, but he was nowhere to be seen. I called out, "Aurora?" Ethan, no response. As I climbed the stairs, I heard a muffled sound coming from our bedroom. The door was closed. I knocked gently. "Aurora, you in there?" There was a rustling. Then Aurora's voice, slightly higher pitched than normal. Just a second. I waited, listening to more shuffling before she opened the door. Her cheeks were flushed, hair slightly disheveled. "Oh, hey," she said, breathless. "You're home early." I peered over her shoulder into the room. Her laptop was on the bed, screen now dark. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah, of course," she replied, a little too quickly. "Just cleaning out some of Ethan's old stuff." My eyes landed on the nightstand. 3 empty baby bottles sat there, looking out of place. "Cleaning." How I gestured towards them. Aurora's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, those. Yeah, I found them in the back of Ethan's closet. I thought I'd wash them out before donating." Something about her explanation felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on why. We'd gotten rid of Ethan's baby stuff years ago. Why would there suddenly be bottles in his closet? "Where's Ethan?" I asked, changing the subject. "He's at my mom's for a few hours," Aurora said, relaxing a bit. "I needed some time to organize things." I nodded, still feeling uneasy. "Well, I'll let you get back to it. I'll start dinner." As I turned to leave, Aurora called out. Miles, I looked back at her. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Guilt, fear, but then it was gone, replaced by a forced smile. "Thanks for understanding." I headed downstairs, my mind racing. What was she really doing up there? Why did she seem so flustered? And those bottles, it didn't add up. But I pushed the thoughts aside, focusing instead on what to make for dinner. Maybe I was overthinking things. Maybe this was just part of that rough patch I'd been hoping we'd get through. But as I stood in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong in our home. The distance between us seemed to be growing by the day, and I had no idea how to bridge it. I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling that had been growing in the pit of my stomach. Aurora's stepbrother, Kyle, had been popping up at our house more and more lately. It wasn't that I disliked the guy, but something about his increased presence just didn't sit right with me. Kyle was always around when I wasn't home. At first I thought nothing of it. He was going through a rough patch, needed some help here and there. Aurora was always the nurturing type, so it made sense she'd want to be there for him. But as the weeks went by, I started noticing little things. One day I came home early from work, hoping to surprise Aurora with lunch. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw Kyle's beat-up Chevy parked on the street. The moment I walked in, there was a flurry of movement upstairs, followed by Aurora coming down, looking flustered. "Oh, hey, honey. You're home early," she said, a bit too cheerfully. Kyle appeared behind her, giving me a casual nod. "Hey, Miles. Just stopped by to borrow some tools." "Thanks, sis." He brushed past me, giving me a pat on the shoulder that felt oddly patronizing. I watched him drive away, then turned to Aurora. "He's been around a lot lately." "Ha." She laughed it off. "Oh, you know Kyle always needs a helping hand." But her laugh didn't reach her eyes, and I couldn't help but feel like I was missing something important. As the days went on, I found myself paying more attention to Kyle's comings and goings. It seemed like every time I called home during my lunch break, he was there. Aurora always had an excuse: he needed help with job applications, or he was fixing something around the house. But why did it always have to be when I wasn't around? One night I woke up to use the bathroom and noticed Aurora's phone screen light up on the nightstand. I shouldn't have looked. I know that, but something compelled me to glance at the notification. It was a message from Kyle. "I can't wait for tomorrow. It'll be so fun." My heart sank. What could they possibly be planning that was so exciting? And why didn't I know about it? I picked up her phone, hesitating for a moment before unlocking it. I scrolled through her messages with Kyle, but most of the conversation had been deleted. Just seeing those blank spaces made my stomach churn. I put the phone back, feeling like a complete asshole for snooping, but also increasingly certain that something wasn't right. As I lay there in the dark, listening to Aurora's steady breathing beside me, I couldn't help but wonder what secrets were hiding behind those deleted messages. I couldn't shake this gut feeling that something was off. Every time Kyle showed up at our house, the air seemed to crackle with an unspoken tension. I'd catch Aurora's eyes darting between us, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. One afternoon, I came home early to find them in the kitchen. Kyle was leaning against the counter, a little too close to Aurora for my comfort. They jumped apart when I walked in, like teenagers caught smoking behind the school. "Oh, hey Miles." Aurora's voice was pitched higher than usual. "Kyle just stopped by too. To borrow some tools," Kyle finished, flashing that easy grin of his. You know me, always working on something. I nodded, not buying it for a second. Kyle hadn't worked an honest day in his life. "Right, well, don't let me interrupt." I headed upstairs, my mind racing. Later that night, I casually brought up Kyle's visit. "So, what was Kyle really doing here today?" Aurora's shoulders tensed. "I told you he needed to borrow some tools. Funny, I didn't see him take any when he left." She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, we couldn't find what he needed. It's no big deal." I wanted to press further, but the words stuck in my throat. Part of me was afraid of what I might uncover if I dug too deep. Over the next few weeks, I found myself watching Aurora more closely. She'd spend hours on her phone, angling the screen away from me. Whenever Kyle's name came up, she'd change the subject so fast it gave me whiplash. One night, I woke up to the soft glow of Aurora's phone. She was curled away from me, typing furiously. I caught a glimpse of Kyle's name before she locked the screen and pretended to be asleep. The seed of suspicion had taken root, and it was growing into something I couldn't ignore, but I still didn't have any concrete evidence. Was I just being paranoid? Or was there really something going on between my wife and her stepbrother? I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to follow my wife, but there I was, sitting in my car, watching Aurora speed off like she was late for something important. She told me she was going to visit her mom, but something in my gut twisted when she said it. Maybe it was the way she couldn't quite meet my eyes, or how she fumbled with her keys at the door. I waited a few minutes after she left, then grabbed my own keys. The whole time I was telling myself this was crazy, that I was being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I kept a good distance behind her car, my palms sweating on the steering wheel. When she made that turn away from her mom's place, my heart sank. I knew where she was headed. Kyle's neighborhood. I watched her pull into his driveway, my stomach churning. She practically jumped out of the car and rushed inside like she couldn't wait to get there. I sat there, trying to breathe, trying to convince myself there was some innocent explanation, but deep down I knew. After a few minutes of sitting there, feeling like I might puke, I made up my mind. I had to know for sure. I got out of the car, my legs shaky as I walked up to Kyle's place. The curtains were mostly closed, but I could see glimpses inside through the gaps. I crept closer, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they'd hear it. As I peered through the window, I saw. Pressing my forehead against the cool glass of the window, I tried to steady my breathing. The scene inside Kyle's living room was surreal, like some grotesque parody of a family gathering. Aurora and Kyle half naked and drenched in milk, wearing diapers. My mind struggled to comprehend this twisted vision with the woman I'd married, and the man I thought was harmlessly immature. My stomach churned, the betrayal settling deep within my gut. It wasn't just the absurdity of the scene, but the depth of deception. Aurora had often complained about the monotony of our lives, but this was beyond any wild impulse. The diapers, the milk. It dawned on me that Aurora's suggestions about spicing things up, experimenting with role-playing, were red flags I had ignored, brushing it off as a quirk of hers. I stepped back from the window, nearly tripping over my own feet. The porch felt like it would give way beneath me. There was a rage building within me, but it was smothered by an overwhelming sense of betrayal and violation. This was nothing like catching someone in an unguarded moment. This was an entire underworld of secrets that had been slowly unearthing themselves, and now everything lay exposed under the harsh light of reality. Images of Aurora packing Ethan's baby bottles under some flimsy pretext now made a terrible sense. Those bottles weren't relics of our son's infancy, they were props in some elaborate escapade. I nearly felt sick at the thought of them using items that once belonged to our son in such a way. I moved to the side of the house, my head spinning. Each step felt heavy, like trudging through quicksand. My sense of time distorted, disbelief still waging war with the plain truth in front of my eyes. Then, breaking the stillness, the sound of my own heavy breathing brought me back. Without thinking, I stormed into the house, kicking open the door. "What the hell is this?" My voice came out low and cold, barely containing the fury bubbling beneath the surface. Aurora's hands shook as she fumbled with a nearby blanket, desperately trying to cover herself. Milk dripped from her chin, and I felt my stomach lurch. Kyle sat there, pale and speechless, not even attempting to offer an explanation. The silence stretched on, oppressive and suffocating. I couldn't tear my eyes away from them, disgust and betrayal warring within me. How long had this been going on? How many times had they laughed at me behind my back? Aurora broke first, her sobs cutting through the quiet. "Miles, I can explain, please. Just listen." Her voice was barely a whisper, choked with tears. I didn't move, didn't speak. What could she possibly say to justify this? She reached out towards me, her face a mess of tears and milk. "It's not what it looks like," she stammered, words tumbling out in a frantic, incoherent stream. I developed this fetish. I didn't mean for Kyle to get involved. It's just role-playing. Nothing more. I never meant for it to go this far." Each word was like a knife twisting in my gut. I'd known something was wrong, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. "Please, Miles," Aurora begged, still kneeling on the floor. "Say something." I looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman I'd loved, the mother of my child, reduced to this pitiful sight. And for what? Some twisted game. Without a word, I stepped back, letting the door swing shut behind me. I heard Aurora's wail as I walked away, but I didn't turn back. I couldn't. The drive home was a blur. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. I kept seeing flashes of what I'd witnessed. Aurora and Kyle in diapers, the milk, the look of terror on their faces when I burst in. When I got home, I went straight to our bedroom and started packing a bag. Clothes, toiletries, anything I might need for a few days. I couldn't stay here. Not with the memories of Aurora's betrayal haunting every corner. Hours passed. I sat in the living room, staring at nothing, my packed bag by my feet. When I heard Aurora's car pull up, I didn't move. She came in quietly, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off with a look. I didn't want to hear her excuses, her explanations. Nothing she could say would make this right. Without a word, I picked up my bag and headed for the guest room. I could feel her eyes on me, pleading silently, but I didn't look back. I shut the door behind me, finally allowing myself to breathe. The next few days passed in a haze of cold silence. I went to work, came home, ate, slept, all without acknowledging Aurora's existence. She tried to talk to me several times, her voice trembling with unshed tears, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. The wall between us was impenetrable, built of betrayal and shattered trust. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, Aurora and Kyle, in their disgusting roleplay. The image was seared into my brain, a constant reminder of how our life together had been destroyed. One night I heard Aurora crying in our, No, her bedroom. Part of me wanted to go to her, to comfort her like I used to. But then I remembered the sight of her kneeling on Kyle's floor, milk on her chin, and the urge vanished. This silence, this cold war between us, was worse than any screaming match could have been. But I didn't know how to bridge the gap, didn't know if I even wanted to. How could we come back from this? Over the next few days, I couldn't bring myself to look at Aurora every time she entered a room. I felt my jaw clench and my stomach turn. The betrayal was too fresh, too raw. I'd catch glimpses of her, eyes red-rimmed and pleading, but I'd turn away. What could she possibly say to make this right? The silence in our house was deafening. I spent most of my time in the guest room, only emerging when necessary. Aurora tried to corner me a few times, her voice trembling as she begged for a chance to explain. But explain what? The image of her and Kyle in those diapers, it was seared into my brain. Miles, please, she'd say, her voice barely above a whisper. We need to talk about this. I'd just shake my head and walk away. What was there to talk about? The trust was gone, shattered like glass. Every memory of our life together now felt tainted, manipulated. Had she been thinking of Kyle all along? Had I been nothing but a cover for her twisted desires? One night I overheard her crying in our bedroom, our old bedroom. The sound tugged at something in my chest, but I pushed it down. She'd made her choice. She'd lied, cheated, and worst of all, brought the perversion into our home. I thought of Ethan's bottles, used as props in their sick game, and felt bile rise in my throat. Aurora tried leaving notes, little scraps of paper with tearful apologies scrawled on them. I'd find them on the kitchen counter, slipped under the guest room door. I crumpled each one without reading, tossing them in the trash. Her words meant nothing now. Days passed in this cold war. I'd see Aurora's shoulders slump more with each passing hour, her attempts to reach out growing weaker, but I couldn't bring myself to care. The woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by a stranger who betrayed everything we'd built together. One night, after a week of cold silence and emotional avoidance, I sat across from Aurora at the kitchen table, my face a mask of stone. But tonight, I knew I had to face this head-on. Aurora looked small and fragile, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. Part of me wanted to reach out and comfort her, a reflex from years of marriage, but that instinct was quickly squashed by the image of her and Kyle that was now seared into my brain. I can't do this anymore. Aurora, I said, my voice eerily calm even to my own ears. I watched as she flinched, but I pressed on. I thought I knew who you were. I thought the woman I married was someone I could trust. But now, every time I look at you, all I see is someone who disgusts me. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. The pain and anger I'd been bottling up for days came pouring out. I'm disgusted by what you've done with Kyle, by the things you did together, disgusted that you would go to such a sick place, that you would choose him over us, over your family. My voice cracked, but I quickly regained control. You betrayed everything I thought we had, and for what? Some twisted fantasy. I stared at her, willing her to look me in the eye, but she couldn't. She just sat there, sobbing quietly. How could you think I would ever forgive this? You didn't just hurt me, you made me feel like a fool. Like the life we had, the family we built, was some joke to you. Aurora tried to speak, her voice shaky. Miles, please. No, I cut her off sharply. Don't beg, it won't change anything. I don't want your apologies. I don't want your excuses. I'm disgusted by what you've become. I can't even stand to be in the same room as you anymore. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I couldn't bear to look at her anymore. The woman I loved, the mother of my child, had become a stranger to me, a stranger who had shattered every ounce of trust I had in her. We're done, I said, my back to her. There's nothing left here. You killed it the moment you stepped into that room with him. I walked away, leaving her sobbing at the table. Each step I took felt heavy, like I was walking through mud, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. The Aurora I knew and loved was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, my bedroom now, I felt a mixture of relief and overwhelming sadness. Relief that I'd finally said what needed to be said, but sadness for the life we once had, the future we'd planned together. I packed a bag, throwing in clothes haphazardly. I needed to get out of this house, away from the memories that now felt tainted. As I zipped up the bag, my eyes fell on a family photo on the dresser. It was from Ethan's last birthday, all three of us smiling widely at the camera. I picked it up, tracing my finger over our faces. How had we gone from that happy family to this? How had Aurora thrown it all away for whatever it was she had with Kyle? The thought of them together, in those ridiculous outfits, made my stomach churn. I put the photo face down and grabbed my bag. As I headed downstairs, I could still hear Aurora's muffled sobs from the kitchen. Part of me wanted to go to her, to shake her and demand answers, but what good would that do? No explanation could undo what she'd done. I paused at Ethan's room, peeking in at his sleeping form. My heart ached for him. He was innocent in all of this, and yet his life was about to be turned upside down. I made a silent promise to him that no matter what happened between Aurora and me, I would always be there for him. As I reached for the front door, I heard Aurora's footsteps behind me. "Miles, wait," she pleaded, her voice hoarse from crying. "Where are you going?" I turned to face her, my hand still on the doorknob. "I can't stay here tonight. I need space." "But what about Ethan? What do I tell him in the morning?" I sighed heavily. "Tell him the truth, that Daddy needed some time away to think. I'll call him tomorrow." Aurora nodded, tears still streaming down her face. "Miles, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but please, can't we try to work this out? For Ethan's sake." I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in days. The woman standing before me was a shell of the person I married. Her eyes, once full of warmth and love, now held only desperation and shame. "I don't know if we can," Aurora, I said softly. "What you did, it's not just about the affair. It's about the lies, the deceit. It's about you choosing your desires over our family. I don't know if I can ever trust you again." She reached out to touch my arm, but I flinched away. "Please, Miles, I'll do anything. We can go to counseling. I'll cut all ties with Kyle. Just please don't give up on us." I shook my head, feeling the weight of our broken marriage pressing down on me. "I'm not the one who gave up on us, Aurora. You did that when you decided to betray everything we built together." With that, I opened the door and stepped out into the cool night air. As I walked to my car, I could hear Aurora's sobs echoing behind me, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. The future I had imagined for us was gone, shattered by our actions. As I drove away from the house that had been our home, I felt a mix of emotions washing over me. Anger, sadness, betrayal, and underneath it all, a deep, aching loss. The life I thought I had was gone, and I had no idea what the future held. But one thing was clear: things would never be the same again.